The dust cloud bloomed on the horizon like a promise of trouble, rolling into Leadville, Colorado with the same oppressive heat that had gripped the mining town all summer of 1879. Genevieve James clutched her mother's handkerchief, the last thing she had of the woman, as she watched the approaching stagecoach from the porch of the general store. Her stomach twisted with anticipation and dread. This was the day she would have to face Mr. Blackwell, the loan shark who'd been circling like a vulture since her father's death 3 months prior. Miss James, the sharp voice of Mrs. Hendricks, the store owner's wife, cut through Genevieve's thoughts. "I'm afraid I can't extend any more credit. Not until your father's debts are settled." Genevieve nodded, trying to maintain dignity despite the flush of shame heating her cheeks. At 22, she was alone in the world now, with nothing but a ramshackle cabin and mountains of debt her father had accumulated during his failed prospecting ventures. "I understand," she said softly. "I'll find a way to pay." But how? The question haunted her as she made her way down Leadville's main street, the weight of her long chestnut hair heavy against her back in the summer heat. She had skills she could read and write better than most, could cook and sew, but in a boomtown filled with miners and desperate men, those talents didn't count for much. 3 hours later, Genevieve stood trembling in Mr. Blackwell's office, a converted back room of the Silver Dollar Saloon that reeked of cigar smoke and whiskey. "Your time's up, Miss James," Blackwell said, his thin lips barely moving as he spoke. "I was lenient out of respect for your father, but business is business. Please, just 1 more month," she begged. "I can find work." "The debt is due now." His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "There are ways a pretty girl like you could work it off." Genevieve backed away, bumping into the door. "I would rather die." Blackwell's laugh was cold. "No need for dramatics. There's another option." He nodded toward her hair. "That fine mane of yours would fetch a good price. The wig makers back east pay top dollar for quality hair like that." Her hand instinctively went to her locks, which fell past her waist. Her mother had always said her hair was her crown, her one true beauty. That's barbaric," she whispered. "It's business. Your hair or your virtue, Miss James. Or I take the cabin tomorrow." She left the office with her decision made, tears streaming down her face. The following morning, she sat rigid in the barber's chair as her chestnut tresses fell to the floor in heavy swaths. Each snip of the scissors felt like a betrayal of everything she'd ever been. When it was over, the barber handed her a mirror. Genevieve barely recognized the woman staring back, with her jagged chin-length hair making her look like a shorn sheep. But the pouch of coins in her hand would buy her another month of survival, at least. The walk back to her cabin on the outskirts of town was the longest of her life. Every person she passed seemed to stare, and she could swear she heard whispers trailing after her. Head down, she hurried past the livery stable, not noticing the tall figure leaning against the doorway until his voice stopped her. "That's quite a change, miss." Genevieve looked up to meet the steadiest pair of blue eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a man she'd noticed around town but never spoken to, Lucas Harrington, a cowboy who'd been working the ranches outside Leadville for the past year or so. Unlike the miners and gamblers who made up most of the population, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that didn't demand attention. "I hardly think it's any of your concern," she replied, her hand self-consciously rising to touch her shorn locks. "No offense meant," he said, pushing his hat back to reveal sandy brown hair. "It's just that a lady doesn't usually part with her hair unless something's wrong." Something in his tone, genuine concern without pity, made her pause. "Everything's wrong, Mr. Harrington, but I don't see how that matters to you." He nodded thoughtfully. "Fair enough." Then, as she turned to go, he added, "It'll grow wild under my sky, you know." She turned back, confused. "Pardon?" "Your hair," he explained, his eyes crinkling slightly at the corners. "Out on my land, away from town, there's nothing but open sky and fresh air. Makes everything grow stronger." "Are you mocking me?" she asked, her voice tight. "Not at all, just offering a thought." He tipped his hat. "Good day, Miss James." She walked away, puzzled by the strange encounter, but with more pressing concerns weighing on her mind. The money from her hair would only stave off disaster temporarily. She needed a permanent solution. That solution came in the form of a notice posted outside the assayer's office. Teacher wanted for children of Leadville. Inquire at town hall. The position wouldn't pay much, but it would be steady work, something she was qualified for. Hope flickering in her chest for the first time in months, Genevieve made her way to town hall. Mayor Thompson, a portly man with an impressive mustache, looked skeptical when she inquired about the position. You have experience, Miss James? I was educated in Denver before moving here with my father. I can teach reading, writing, arithmetic, and history. His gaze lingered on her choppy hair. The mothers might not approve of someone so unconventional. Genevieve stood taller. My appearance has nothing to do with my abilities, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps not, but appearances matter in a position of influence over young minds. She left town hall with her dignity intact, but her hopes dashed. As darkness fell, she sat on the porch of her cabin, watching the stars emerge above the jagged line of mountains. Survival in Leadville was proving harder than she'd imagined. A sound in the darkness startled her hoofbeats, approaching along the dirt track leading to her home. She tensed, ready to run inside and bolt the door, when a familiar voice called out, "Evening, Miss James." Lucas Harrington's figure materialized out of the darkness, mounted on a dappled gray horse. He dismounted smoothly, keeping a respectful distance from her porch. "Mr. Harrington, what brings you here at this hour?" "I overheard at the livery that Blackwell's been pressuring you about your father's debts," he said directly. "And I saw you leaving town hall looking like someone had stolen your last hope." She bristled. "Are you following me?" "No, madam. Leadville's a small town with a big mouth. Word travels." Genevieve sighed, too exhausted for pretense. "What do you want?" "I need help at my ranch," he said. 10 miles west of town. I've got a small operation, just started, but it's growing. I need someone who can keep books, handle correspondence, and maybe help around the house." She eyed him suspiciously. "And you're offering this position to me? A woman you barely know? I know you're educated, I know you're desperate but not willing to compromise your principles. And I know you need honest work." He paused. "It would mean living at the ranch. I have a separate cabin for you. The pay isn't much, but includes room and board." "Why would you help me?" Lucas shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable for the first time. "Your father helped me once when I first came to these parts. Never asked for anything in return." His eyes met hers. "I believe in paying debts, Miss James. The honorable kind." Genevieve considered his words. The offer seemed legitimate, and certainly better than her current prospects. Still, she hesitated. "I would need to maintain my reputation." "Of course, like I said, separate cabin. And my foreman and his wife live on the property too. Mrs. Wilkins would be company for you." He smiled slightly. "I'm not in the habit of compromising ladies, Miss James. This is strictly business." After a sleepless night of deliberation, Genevieve accepted his offer. 2 days later, she found herself in a small but clean cabin on Harrington Ranch, with mountains rising majestically to the west and rolling grasslands to the east. The main house was modest but well built, and the operation included a stable, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. True to his word, Lucas was a perfect gentleman, keeping their interactions professional as he showed her the account books and explained her duties. Mrs. Wilkins, the foreman's wife, was a kindly woman in her 50s who seemed delighted to have another woman on the ranch. "It'll be nice having a young face around here," she said warmly. "This place needs a woman's touch." The work was demanding but satisfying. Genevieve discovered she had a knack for organization that transformed Lucas's chaotic ledgers into orderly records. She wrote letters to cattle buyers, ordered supplies, and gradually took on more responsibilities around the ranch. As the weeks passed, her hair began to grow out, though she kept it trimmed to a practical length that fell just below her ears. One evening in late September, as she sat on her cabin porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, Lucas approached with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and settled on the porch steps, a respectful distance away. "The books look good," he said. "That buyer from Denver agreed to our price." "I'm glad to hear it." She sipped the coffee, finding it strong and sweet just how she liked it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while until Lucas spoke again. "Your hair's growing back." Self-consciously, she touched the ends. Slowly. "Told you it would," he said with a slight smile. "Wild and free under this sky." "Why did you say that? That day in town?" Lucas looked out at the darkening landscape. "My mother used to say something similar. She believed that some places had healing in them." He glanced at her. "You looked like you needed healing that day." The simple honesty of his words touched her. "I did." As autumn progressed into winter, Genevieve found herself watching Lucas more closely, the way he worked with the horses, patient and firm, how he treated his ranch hands with respect, the quiet authority he commanded without raising his voice. He was unlike any man she'd known in Leadville, most of whom were either rough miners or slick gamblers. The first snow came early that year, blanketing the ranch in white. Genevieve woke one morning to find her cabin door blocked by a drift. Before she could worry about how to get out, she heard shoveling, and minutes later, Lucas cleared a path to her door. "Thought you might need a way out," he said, breath fogging in the cold air. "Mrs. Wilkins has breakfast going in the main house." "Thank you," she said, wrapping her shawl tighter. "I've never seen snow like this before." "First winter in the high country?" When she nodded, he smiled. "It's beautiful, but dangerous if you don't respect it. Don't go far from the buildings without letting someone know." His concern warmed her more than the shawl. As they walked toward the main house, their boots crunching in the fresh snow, Genevieve realized she felt safer here than she ever had in town. The winter brought them closer together by necessity. With outdoor work limited by the weather, Lucas spent more time in the house, often sitting by the fire in the evening, while Genevieve read aloud from one of the books he kept, mostly practical volumes on ranching, but a few novels and poetry collections as well. She discovered he had a quick mind and dry wit that made her laugh more than she had in years. One evening, as a blizzard howled outside, she paused in her reading of the Odyssey to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You remind me of Penelope sometimes," he said quietly. "Waiting faithfully for her husband to return? I'm not married, Mr. Harrington." "No, not that part. The resilience. The quiet strength." He looked away, almost embarrassed. "Forgive me. That was presumptuous." "Not at all," she replied softly. "It's one of the kindest things anyone has ever said to me." Christmas arrived with a break in the weather. Lucas surprised her with a gift, a tortoiseshell comb for her hair, which now curled softly around her face. "It was my mother's," he explained. "She would have wanted you to have it." Genevieve's throat tightened with emotion. "I can't accept something so personal." "Please," he said. "It's been sitting in a drawer for years. It should be used by someone who will appreciate it." She accepted the gift, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact sent a jolt through her that she couldn't ignore. That night, alone in her cabin, she brushed her growing hair with the comb and wondered when her feelings for Lucas had transformed from gratitude to something deeper and more complicated. January brought more snow and an unexpected visitor. Genevieve was working in the study when she heard raised voices from the main room. She opened the door to find Mr. Blackwell standing in Lucas's home, looking as out of place as a snake in a henhouse. "Miss James," Blackwell said with a cold smile, "I've been looking for you." "What do you want?" she asked, her heart pounding. "Your arrangement with Mr. Harrington doesn't settle your debt to me. Interest has been accumulating." Lucas stepped between them. "Any business you have with Miss James can go through me now." Blackwell's eyes narrowed. "This isn't your concern, Harrington." "Miss James works for me. Her welfare is very much my concern." Lucas's voice was calm but held an edge of steel. How much does she owe you? After Blackwell left with a bank draft from Lucas, Genevieve confronted him in the study. You shouldn't have done that. It's my debt to settle. It's settled now, he said simply. Consider it an advance against your wages. I can't be indebted to you this way. Lucas looked at her for a long moment. Do you think I expect something in return, beyond the work you're already doing? No, she admitted, but I need to make my own way. I need to know I can stand on my own. He nodded slowly. I understand. We'll adjust your wages to cover the debt over time, if that makes you feel better. But Genevieve, it was the first time he'd used her given name. You don't have to face everything alone. The thaw began in March, turning the ranch into a muddy mess but bringing with it a sense of renewal. Genevieve's hair now brushed her shoulders, and sometimes she caught Lucas looking at it with a smile that made her flush. As spring took hold, activity on the ranch increased. New calves were born, fences needed mending, and Lucas was often out from dawn till dusk. Genevieve missed their quiet evenings together, but found satisfaction in running the household efficiently in his absence. One evening in late April, Lucas returned earlier than expected. She was in the garden behind the main house, planting vegetables with Mrs. Wilkins when he approached, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Genevieve, could I speak with you? He asked, privately. Mrs. Wilkins made herself scarce with a knowing smile that made Genevieve curious. She wiped her hands on her apron and followed Lucas to a bench near the garden fence. Is something wrong? She asked. No, he said quickly. Nothing's wrong. In fact, things are better than they've ever been. He took a deep breath. The ranch is doing well. The new contracts from Denver will bring in more than enough to expand. That's wonderful news, she said, though she sensed there was more. I've been thinking about the future, he continued, about what I want for this place, for myself. His eyes met hers. For us, if there could be an us. Genevieve's heart skipped. What are you saying, Lucas? I'm saying I love you, he said simply. I think I have since I saw you walking down the street with your head held high, even after they took your hair. You've shown more courage and grace than anyone I've ever known. Tears sprang to her eyes. I never thought I would feel this way again, safe, hopeful. You gave me that, Lucas. You gave it to yourself. I just provided the space. He took her hand gently. I'm not asking for an answer now, but I want you to know that I would be honored if you would consider becoming my wife. The question hung in the air between them, full of possibility. Genevieve thought of the journey that had brought her here, the grief, the desperation, the humiliation of having her hair sold to pay a debt, and then this man, with his quiet strength and unwavering respect, offering her not just sanctuary but partnership. I don't need time to consider, she said. My answer is yes. The kiss they shared was gentle at first, then deeper, filled with promise. When they finally broke apart, Lucas ran a hand through her hair, which caught the last rays of the setting sun. See, he said softly, just like I said, wild and free under my sky. They were married in June, with the mountains as witnesses and wildflowers adorning the small chapel in Leadville. Genevieve wore her hair loose around her shoulders, crowned with a circlet of blue lupines that matched Lucas's eyes. As summer ripened into fall, the ranch prospered under their joint care. Genevieve's accounting skills and Lucas's knowledge of cattle proved a formidable combination. They expanded their herd, hired more hands, and built a new, larger home that Genevieve filled with books and music. By the following spring, Genevieve's hair had grown past her shoulders again, though not as long as before. She had no desire to return to the restrictive styles she'd once worn. Out here, with the wind in her hair and the vast Colorado sky above, she had found a freedom she'd never known in town. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their new home watching a thunderstorm roll across the distant plains, Lucas placed a hand on her still flat stomach. Do you think our child will have your hair? He asked. Genevieve covered his hand with hers, smiling at the secret they'd only just confirmed with the doctor in town. I hope so. And your eyes. And your spirit, he added, kissing her temple. Lightning flashed on the horizon, illuminating the land that had become her haven. I never thanked you properly, she said, for what you said that day in town about my hair growing wild under your sky. It gave me hope when I needed it most. I meant it, he replied. Some things need space to grow into what they're meant to be. Hair, hope, love, he smiled. You, me, us. The years that followed brought challenges, droughts, harsh winters, and the usual trials of ranch life, but also immeasurable joy. Their first child, a son they named James after Genevieve's father, arrived the following winter with a full head of chestnut hair and his father's blue eyes. 2 years later, a daughter joined their family, with her mother's spirit and her father's quiet determination. Leadville changed, too, as the silver boom waned and more families settled in the area. Genevieve eventually realized her dream of teaching, establishing a small school on the ranch for their children and those of the ranch hands. Lucas expanded their operation to include horse breeding, developing a line of sturdy mountain horses that became sought after throughout Colorado. Mr. Blackwell left town after a series of bad investments, his departure unmourned. Mrs. Wilkins and her husband stayed on at the ranch until they were too old to work, then retired to a cottage Lucas built for them near the main house, where they could enjoy their grandchildren and watch the seasons change over the mountains. On the 10th anniversary of their marriage, Lucas surprised Genevieve with a special gift, a silver locket containing a small lock of her hair, preserved from that day long ago when it had been cut. "Why would you keep this?" she asked, touching the dark strand nestled against the silver. "To remember," he said. "Not the hardship, but the beginning. The moment everything changed." Genevieve thought about the strange path that had led her to this life, how the loss of something she'd valued had ultimately brought her to the place where she truly belonged. Her hair now fell in waves down her back, streaked with a few early strands of silver, wild and free, just as Lucas had predicted. "I wouldn't change a thing," she said, leaning against his shoulder as the sun set behind the mountains they both loved. "Not a single moment that brought us here." As twilight gathered around their home, they sat together in comfortable silence, surrounded by the land that had witnessed their journey from strangers to lovers to family. The Colorado wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of tomorrow. Under this vast sky, they had found not just love, but a home for their hearts, as enduring as the mountains and as wild as Genevieve's hair, flowing free in the evening breeze.